Bakterie potrafią, aby się schować przed czynnikami niekorzystnymi i przetrwać, potrafią wejść pomiędzy te dwa białka. Ja mam to na zdjęciach, one siedzą jak pod kołdrą po prostu. Nieprawdopodobne.
To, co mówiłem o oknach w pokojach chińskich, tam wydawało się, że jest prosta sprawa, że jest 10 okien takich samych, ale każdy łuk zwieńczający te okna był inny.
The Wilanow Palace Museum has been entrusted to preserve an exceptional place, filled with unique artifacts connected with the legacy of King John Sobieski III, where nature and culture harmoniously coexist. With the help of structural funds of the European Union and other sources of funding such as the financial mechanism of the European Economic Area, the royal splendour of Wilanow is being restored. On September the 19th, the museum hosted a conference on the use of European Economic Area financial mechanism funds in the restoration of the national heritage at Wilanow. The aim of the conference was to sum up the project Restoration of the Royal Palace and Garden Complex in Wilanow, Stage 2. The project was implemented in collaboration with the governments of 3 countries, Iceland, Liechtenstein and Norway. The museum was one of the first beneficiaries in the culture sector to utilise the funds of the EEA Financial Mechanism and the Norwegian Financial Mechanism. The Wilanow project came first in the ranking of applications recommended for implementation. In effect, it received funding to the amount of €3,496,370. The guests of honour attending the conference were His Excellency Enoch Nygaard, the Ambassador of the Kingdom of Norway, Mr. Stein Inge Nesvåg, Attaché at the Embassy of the Kingdom of Norway, Mrs. Karolina Tilos Sova, Head of the Department of European Funds at the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage. Opening the conference, Director Pavel Yaskanis addressed His Excellency the Ambassador with words of gratitude for the formation, jointly with Iceland and Liechtenstein, of the financial instruments supporting the culture sector in Poland. His Excellency Enoch Nygaard confirmed that Norway, although not a member of the European Union, is the Union's loyal and trustworthy partner. In his opinion, the EEA Financial Mechanism and the Norwegian Financial Mechanism helped strengthen the ties between Norway and Poland. He expressed satisfaction at the fact that through these grants, Norway participated in the restoration of the Royal Palace and Gardens complex in Wilanow. The second part of the conference was dedicated to the presentation of the results of the project. Professor Andrzej Kos, Director of the Interdepartmental Institute of Conservation and Restoration of Art at the Academy of Fine Arts in Warsaw, presented the effects of conservation and restoration work on the palace facade. He pointed out that the term Wilanow yellow has become a common term among the conservationists, denoting a characteristic shade of yellow. For nearly 40 years following the last renovations carried out in the 1960s of the 20th century, the Baroque facades of the palace and its sculpted ornaments have faced gradual deterioration due to environmental and human factors. Upon examination of the palace facades, the conservationists formulated a long-term plan to restore the characteristic features of a Baroque residence from the period following the year 1720, using a full palette of colours. In the year 2006, the fully restored front facade of the Wilanow Palace was unveiled. The following years led to a full restoration of the splendour of the former residence of King John Sobieski III, revealing new colours, restored sculptures, reliefs and wall paintings executed in the al fresco technique. Altogether, 9,993 square metres of historical surfaces have been restored. Additionally, 35 antique sculptures from the palace facades have been replicated. Dr. Agnieszka Leszkiewicz-Lauder, Deputy Manager of the Conservation Department, gave a presentation on the assessment of microbiological conditions and the stabilization of climate parameters inside the museum. The aim of the programme was to conduct bacteriological and microbiological monitoring of the air in the palace interiors and around other artefacts belonging to the Wilanow collection. Altogether, 79 rooms have been tested and 1,972 air samples have been taken for analysis. The most interesting results came from the observations of the number of bacteria responsible for the degradation of the artifacts. It was concluded that there was a lack of sustained correlation between the number of microbes and environmental changes. Research on the presence and metabolic activity of microbes affecting the deterioration of artifacts made of cellulose, such as drawings and watercolours, and those made of animal protein, such as silk curtains or upholstery, was conducted on such a scale for the first time in the museum. In 2008, the results of the research programme were presented at an international conference on indoor air quality in Vienna. The findings have generated a lot of interest among the conservationists. The research results have added to the growing body of expertise on the protection of Wilanow artifacts. In addition, preventative conservation activities could also be conducted more effectively. These include changing the size of visiting groups and replanning the tour routes for visitors. The results of archaeological research conducted within the EEA Financial Mechanism programme were presented by Mr. Andrzej Gołębnik from the Archaeological Conservation Team. An attempt to reconstruct the palace farm based on the findings was presented by Mr. Rafał Solecki. The archaeological study was carried out on a total area of 1,896 square metres. The main objective was to solve some basic research problems connected with the Rose Garden and its surroundings, the palace farm and the North Garden, as well as the areas around the guardhouse and the orangery. One of the effects of the excavations was a series of virtual reconstructions depicting in a photorealistic style the two phases of the gardens, together with the palace and the farm area. These models are based on detailed plans stored in the CAD system, forming a database of visualizations of the open areas surrounding the Wilanow residence. The research findings provided a blueprint for the reconstruction of the old farm. In the course of the works, brick cellars of the vice-captain's house and the gardener's house were discovered. These cellars were in use from the end of the 17th century until the mid-18th century. Also, a dovecote and garden flower beds from the turn of the 17th and 18th century were unearthed. It is worth noting that the results have been documented using the most advanced, high-precision methods. Mr. Rafał Szczepański from the Non-Canon Architecture Studio gave a presentation on non-modernism, the conceptual and stylistic basis of the design of the sculpture pavilion. He outlined the rationale behind the design of the building in the context of the historical character of the Palace and Gardens complex. The pavilion is located along the southern wall of the former royal stables, at the border of the Rose Garden and the Anglo-Chinese garden called Zuga Park. The purpose of using glass elements in the construction of the pavilion was to highlight its stylistic distinctiveness on the one hand, while facilitating the exposition of architectural sculpture exhibits on the other. The form of the pavilion is mildly evocative of the shape of a tent. Thanks to the construction of the pavilion, numerous sculptures and sculptural compositions will be protected from deterioration. Among these, there are 4 priceless 18th century Attic sculptures depicting the Muses from Greek mythology. These sculptures, made from Gotland sandstone, date from the year 1687, and most probably have been brought from Amsterdam during the lifetime of King John Sobieski III. Until now, the sculptures were mounted at the 3rd floor level and could only be viewed from the palace courtyard. The most fitting afterword to the conference and to the entire programme was perhaps given by the head of the Department of the European Funds, Karolina Tilasowa, who in her concluding remarks did not fail to appreciate
pogratulować panu dyrektorowi i całemu zespołowi za ogromny wysiłek włożony nie tylko w pozyskanie tych środków, jak również w ich bardzo dobre i efektywne wykorzystanie. Bardzo się cieszę, że mamy możliwość oglądania efektów tych wysiłków, wieloletnich wysiłków, bo projekty inwestycyjne trwają przez wiele lat. No i mamy nadzieję oglądać tych efektów jak najwięcej przy okazji kolejnych projektów. Bardzo dziękuję.
Dziękuję Pani. Zakończyły się kontrole nikowskie jakieś 2 tygodnie temu obu projektów, czyli Ogoskiego i Pojsiowskiego, z bardzo dobrym rezultatem.